The Lego sun was already dipping low when Kola Balagan trudged into a koi, a worn backpack slung across a shoulder and a second-hand keyboard strapped in a tattered case. He had come from Abaddon with nothing but dreams that Lagos, the city of opportunities, would one day hear his voice. But reality was already biting hard. The caretaker eyed him with amusement as they climbed the steep staircase to the top floor of a faded colonial mansion. The walls were stained with time, the railings rusted. "Oga!" the caretaker grunted, pausing to catch his breath. "This one no be house o. Even warehouse no go except am. But you say you dey find cheap rent. Well, not here be your last bus stop." Kola forced a smile, though his heart sank. The room was small, its ceiling slanted like the roof wanted to crush him. The single window rattled in the breeze, and the bathroom, if it could be called that, was barely large enough to squeeze into. He muttered under his breath, "Which kind dwarf bathroom be this? Person go break waist to enter." But beggars could not be choosers. He had only a few naira left, and most of it would soon disappear into rent. With a resigned sigh, Kola nodded. "I'll take it." Later that evening, his friends from Suralere came by to help haul up his mattress. They laughed and teased as they puffed up the endless flights of stairs. "Kola, you want kill us? This mattress, heavy like coffin," one of them complained. But when they finally reached the rooftop room, they all collapsed in laughter, wiping sweat from their brows. As the sun set, Kola set up his keyboard in the corner. He pressed a few notes, letting the sound fill the empty space. For a brief moment, he imagined himself under bright stage lights, the crowd roaring his name. But the fantasy broke when the sound echoed strangely through the thin walls, bouncing back at him with eerie whispers. That night, as he lay on his mattress staring at the cracked ceiling, he heard it again, the faint murmur of voices. His heart raced. The whispers grew louder, like ghosts trapped in the walls. Panicked, he leapt up, grabbed his slippers, and bolted out into the corridor. He ran down 3 flights before stopping, chest heaving. Sitting behind a parked car outside, Kola laughed nervously at himself. "Now go to this place. Lagos SCF." Slowly, courage returned, and he climbed back up. Standing in his room again, he pressed his palm against the wall. "Uncle Ghost," he whispered, half joking, half serious, "I beg allow me sleep. Tomorrow I go set you free." On the other side of that same wall, Doyen Okoye sat with her sculpting tools. She had heard everything. At first, she thought her new neighbor was mad. But as he pleaded with his imaginary ghost, she couldn't help but laugh. The sound echoed softly in her studio, mixing with the clink of metal against stone. Welcome to Munlyt Stories, where moonlight meets myth. Love timeless tales? Then hit like, subscribe, and join the circle. Every story begins with you. And so, without knowing it, 2 lives had touched. 2 strangers, separated by a thin wall, were about to begin a story neither of them expected. The next morning, Lagos was already awake before Kola. Hawkers called from the street below, car horns blared, and the humid air seeped into his tiny room. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, the events of the night still fresh in his mind. That whispering sound, was it truly a ghost? Determined to prove himself brave, he grabbed an old hammer he had brought from home. "Today I go free you, Uncle Ghost," he muttered, pressing his ear against the wall. "No vex. I go break this your prison." He raised the hammer and struck once, bam. The sound echoed sharply through the thin wall. Almost immediately, a woman's voice shouted from the other side. "Excuse me, what in God's name are you doing?" Kola froze. He blinked, hammer midair, and whispered, "Ghost." "No, idiot." "Neighbor," the voice snapped. "I'm your neighbor, and if you hit that wall again, I will call the caretaker." Kola's jaw dropped. "You mean you're human?" The woman sighed heavily. "Yes, human. My name is Doyen Okoye, and unlike you, I actually work. These walls are paper thin. Every sound you make, every ridiculous ghost talk, I can hear it." Kola dropped the hammer, embarrassed. "And sorry-o. I think say na spirit day disturb me." "Well," Doyen replied dryly, "your spirit talk kept me awake all night. Please, keep your madness to yourself." Kola chuckled nervously. "Ah, neighbor, don't vex. I didn't know. I'm still new here. My name is Kola." There was silence on the other side. Then, Reluctantly, Doyen said, "Fine. Just keep it down." Kola nodded, though she could not see him. "Deal." But quiet was never Kola's strong suit. That afternoon, he set up his keyboard again, gently pressing the keys. A melody filled the air, soft and sad. He sang under his breath, his voice raw but full of longing. He thought he was alone in his music, but every note slipped through the wall like smoke. On the other side, Doyen paused in her sculpting. Her hands stilled over the block of clay as she listened. She hadn't expected her noisy neighbor to have such a voice. There was something unpolished yet powerful in it, the kind of voice that carried emotion rather than perfection. Against her will, she smiled. Then Kola hit a wrong note. "Chai! I done spoil him again," he groaned. Doyen laughed out loud before she could stop herself. The sound startled Kola, who jumped up. "Ah, neighbor, you still dey listen? You're terrible at hiding your mistakes," she teased. Kola scratched his head, grinning. "At least I try. One day I'll make Legos clap for me." Doyen smirked, shaking her head. "We'll see about that. For now, just don't keep me awake with your dreams." That night, lying in bed, Kola stared at the ceiling. His mysterious, sharp-tongued neighbor wasn't a ghost after all. She was real. For the next few days, the thin wall between Kola and Doyen became a battleground. It began innocently enough. Kola, ever the dreamer, spent long evenings strumming his keyboard and singing at the top of his lungs. He thought his voice carried passion, but to Doyen it carried nothing but headache. She was an artist. Her days were spent chiseling, sculpting, and shaping clay into beautiful forms, and she treasured her quiet nights. On Tuesday evening, when Kola launched into a loud rehearsal of a new song, Doyen slammed her fist against the wall. "Some of us work with our hands, not our throats. Keep it down." Kola laughed, shaking his head. "Neighbor, music is food for the soul, oh. Don't you want your soul to eat?" Doyen groaned. "My soul is on a diet. Stop singing." But Kola wasn't one to back down. The very next morning, as Doyen hammered away at a sculpture commission, the rhythmic tack-tack-tack echoed endlessly. Kola, who had been trying to nap after a long night, jumped up. "Neighbor, are you building Third Mainland Bridge in there?" Doyen smirked, sweat glistening on her forehead. "I'm sculpting. It's called art. Something you wouldn't understand." "Oh, please," Kola shot back, pressing his lips against the wall. "Music is also art. In fact, music is the highest art. What you're doing is just pounding yam with clay." "Pounding yam?" Doyen gasped, scandalized. "You bushman!" And so, the war began in earnest. When Kola turned up his singing, Doyen countered with her hammering. When Doyen played her radio loudly, Kola dragged in his friends, laughing and drumming on buckets. Both were determined to drive the other out, but their stubbornness only made them creative. One night, Doyen recorded the sound of her hammer striking metal and played it on repeat through the wall while she quietly sipped tea. Kola retaliated the next day by leaving an alarm clock ticking loudly near the wall all afternoon, knowing it would drive her mad. By Friday, the caretaker was already muttering prayers, begging both tenants to fear God and have mercy. Yet strangely, neither Kola nor Doyen wanted to leave. Beneath the annoyance, there was something addictive about their exchanges, something that made the loneliness of Lagos a little lighter. Late one night, after a particularly long battle of noise, both sides fell unexpectedly quiet. Kola lay on his mattress, sweaty and tired, staring at the cracked ceiling. He laughed softly. "This girl no go kill me." On the other side, Doyen sat among her half-finished sculptures, smiling despite herself. "That boy is a nuisance, but at least he makes life interesting." Though they would never admit it, both were starting to feel it, a strange warmth growing behind the wall, disguised as rivalry but carrying the first sparks of something deeper. For the first time since moving in, neither of them felt truly alone. By Saturday morning, Kola had reached his limit. His voice was hoarse from singing too loudly, and his head pounded from the endless hammering next door. He sat cross-legged on his mattress, rubbing his temples. "If this continues, person fit craze," he muttered. As if on cue, the hammering started again, sharp, deliberate blows that echoed through the thin wall like gunshots. Kola jumped to his feet, marched to the wall, and banged his palm against it. "Neighbor," he shouted, "are you trying to kill me?" On the other side, Doyen smirked. No, just trying to finish my commission before the deadline. What's your excuse for all that shouting you call music? Kola exhaled loudly. This were no good end. If we continue like this, both of us go run mad. There was silence. Then, unexpectedly, Doyen laughed. It was a light, genuine laugh that startled Kola. Maybe you're right, she said. But what do you suggest? Because I'm not leaving. Kola's lips curved into a smile. Neither am I. So maybe we need ground rules. Ground rules? Yes. A truce. He grabbed a notebook, sat at his keyboard stool, and spoke loudly so she could hear. From now on, we divide the day. 4 hours each. During my hours, I can sing, shout, do anything I like, and you must stay quiet. During your hours, you can hammer, sculpt, break wall, whatever you like. I won't complain. There was a pause. Then Doyen asked cautiously, and if you break the rule? Kola grinned. Then you win. I'll leave the apartment. Her voice softened, amused. And if you break it? Then you leave. He shot back, laughing. She chuckled. Fine. I accept. That evening, when Kola's allotted time arrived, he played his keyboard gently at first, testing the truce. He sang a Yoruba folk tune his mother used to hum. His voice carried through the wall, earnest, imperfect, but heartfelt. On the other side, Doyen laid down her hammer and listened. For once, the sound didn't irritate her. She leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. There was something raw in his music, a vulnerability she hadn't expected from the loud, troublesome neighbor. When her time came, she switched on her desk lamp and resumed chiseling the sculpture of a woman's face. Each tap of her tool echoed rhythmically like a heartbeat. Kola, lying on his mattress, found himself listening rather than complaining. Somehow, the sound no longer felt like noise. It was steady, purposeful, like music in its own way. The truce held. For the first time since Kola moved in, both neighbors found peace. Late that night, just before sleep, Kola pressed his palm lightly against the wall. Good night, neighbor. Doyen, surprised, hesitated before replying. Good night, musician. And with that, an unspoken understanding grew between them. What had started as a battle was slowly turning into something neither of them had expected: companionship. The truce had been in place for a week, and surprisingly it worked. Kola and Doyen kept to their hours, and neither had complained once. But with the quiet came something new: curiosity. On a Wednesday evening, as Kola strummed his keyboard during his allotted time, he paused mid-song and leaned close to the wall. Neighbor, he called. From the other side came a faint reply. What is it, musician? Kola grinned. Do you ever get tired of banging that hammer of yours? Honestly, if I close my eyes, I'd think you're building Third Mainland Bridge. Doyen laughed. And if I close mine, I'd think you're strangling a goat with all those off-key notes you sing. Kola clutched his chest in mock injury. Ah, you wound me, neighbor. My voice is a gift. A gift to who? Your ghosts. Doyen teased. The two burst into laughter, their voices mingling through the thin wall. What had once been a weapon of irritation was now a channel of banter. As the days rolled by, their conversations grew longer. Sometimes they argued about whose art was more important, music or sculpture. Other times, they shared little details of their lives. Kola told her how he left Ibadan with nothing but a bag of clothes and a dream. My father used to call me useless, say music no day put food for table. But I couldn't let that stop me. Lagos is my chance. Doyen, though reserved at first, eventually spoke about her family. Born into an elite household in Enugu, her parents had expected her to take over her father's law chambers. Instead, she chose art. To them, sculpting clay is playing with mud. They don't see the beauty in it. Kola chuckled softly. So both of us be stubborn children. Stubborn but brave, she corrected. Sometimes, their banter slipped into playfulness. One night, during her hammering hours, Kola began knocking rhythmically on the wall, turning her sculpting into a drumbeat. She paused, amused. Are you trying to accompany me? Exactly, he laughed. See as we day make music together. I knock, you hammer. Not duet. And another night, when it was Kola's turn, he sang a love ballad exaggeratedly loud, deliberately off-key. Doyen groaned. Please, stop torturing me. Don't pretend you're not enjoying it, Kola teased. She rolled her eyes but smiled all the same. The wall that once divided them had become something else, a strange bridge of connection. Neither could see the other, but each began to imagine. What did this neighbor look like? Did her smile match the warmth in her laugh? Did his eyes shine the way his voice carried emotion? They never asked. Not yet. But late at night, when the city quieted and loneliness pressed heavy, both found comfort pressing their palms lightly against the same wall, knowing that just on the other side, someone was there. For the first time in a long while, neither Kola nor Doyen felt completely alone in Lagos. It was a Friday night when Kola's friends came knocking, loud and restless after too many bottles at the local joint. "Oh boy, open door nah!" one of them shouted, banging until the thin wood rattled. Kola sighed, rubbing his temples. He knew they wouldn't leave quietly. Reluctantly, he opened the door, and in they poured. 3 rowdy young men smelling of cheap gin and roasted suya. "Ah, see musician," one of them teased, grabbing Kola's keyboard. "Sing for us, superstar." Kola snatched it back quickly. "A beg, careful. Not the only thing I get." But they were already making themselves at home, sprawling on his mattress, laughing too loudly and demanding food. The noise spilled through the wall. On the other side, Doyen was trying to finish a sculpture for an upcoming exhibition. The constant racket made her grit her teeth. Finally, she banged on the wall. "Some of us are working. Keep it down." The laughter in Kola's room grew louder. One of his friends smirked. "Neighbor don't vex again. Ah, Kola, you never tell us say you get fine babe next door. Make we greet her." Before Kola could stop them, one pressed his lips to the wall and shouted, "Fine girl. Come join us. We get suya and star beer." The others erupted in laughter. Kola's face burned with embarrassment. "Una no get sense. Leave her out of this." But the damage was done. Doyen's voice came, sharp as a blade. "Kola, I warned you. If you can't control your friends, then you've broken the truce." The room fell silent. Even the rowdy friends shifted uncomfortably. Kola stood, heart pounding, and pressed his palm against the wall. "Neighbor, Doyen, please, don't judge me by them. I didn't ask them to come." There was no reply, only the sound of her tools being set aside. Later, after his friends finally staggered out into the night, Kola sat in the quiet ashamed. He knew he had let her down. He considered knocking on the wall to apologize, but pride held him back. Instead, he sank into his mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. The next morning, he rose early, determined to make it right. He scribbled a note on a piece of paper. "I'm sorry for last night. They embarrassed me too. Please don't let this ruin our truce. Kola!" He folded it neatly and slipped it under her door. Then he waited. Hours passed before she responded. When she finally slid a folded sketch under his door, his heart raced. It was a simple pencil drawing of a cracked wall, but through the crack, 2 hands reached toward each other. At the bottom, she had written, "Don't let others break what we're building." Kola smiled, relief washing over him. For the first time, he realized that behind the wall wasn't just a neighbor, it was someone who saw him, someone who believed he was more than the noise around him. Sunday morning arrived soft and quiet. The compound dogs barked lazily, the scent of akara drifted in from the street, and Lagos seemed to be stretching after a long night. For once, the rooftop floor was peaceful. Kola sat at his keyboard, fingers gliding over the keys. He wasn't singing, just playing gently, lost in the melody. It was his way of apologizing again, a peace offering through music. On the other side, Doyen listened in silence. She could tell it wasn't performance this time. There was no showing off, no loud declarations. Just soft, thoughtful notes. Without thinking, she pressed her palm lightly to the wall. "Kola!" she called softly. He stopped playing. "Yes, neighbor." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "Can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone here in Lagos?" Kola straightened, surprised by her tone. "Of course. You can tell me anything." Doyen hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't come to Lagos just to make art. I came here to escape." Kola leaned closer to the wall, curiosity sparking. "Escape what?" "My family," she said simply. "Back in Enugu, my parents expected me to be a lawyer like my father. They had already planned my life, law school, chambers, marriage to one of their friends' sons. But I couldn't do it. Sculpture is the only thing that makes me feel alive. So I left. I rented this little space with my savings. To them, I'm a disappointment. Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Cola's chest tightened. He knew what it was like to be dismissed by family. He pressed his palm firmly to the wall. Doyen, you're not a disappointment. You're brave. Do you know how many people wish they had your courage? You chose yourself. That's something to be proud of. For a moment, there was silence. Then she laughed softly, though it was tinged with sadness. You make it sound noble. But sometimes, when I'm here working all night, alone, I wonder if I made the right choice. Cola smiled. I wonder the same thing about music every day. My father used to say, Cola, better pick a real trade before hunger finishes you. But I couldn't let go. And now I'm here, chasing a dream that might never happen. Maybe we're both mad. Maybe, she admitted, her voice warming. But it's nice to know I'm not the only mad one. They both laughed, the sound mingling through the wall. That evening, as the sun set over Ikoyi, Cola scribbled lyrics into his notebook, inspired by her words. A song about two dreamers, separated by walls but connected by courage. Meanwhile, Doyen sculpted with renewed energy, her hands moving as if the clay itself understood her struggle. Neither could see the other, but both knew something had shifted. Trust had entered their truce, and with trust, the first fragile strands of love began to weave quietly between them. Monday dawned with restless energy. Cola hadn't slept much the night before. He had circled the audition date in his notebook for weeks. This was his chance, a popular Lagos talent show that promised fame to anyone who could stand out. He stood before the cracked mirror in his room, adjusting his only decent shirt, a white button-up with a missing cufflink. His hands trembled as he straightened the collar. Today we change story, he whispered. From the other side of the wall, Doyen called. You're up early. Big day. Cola grinned nervously. The biggest. Talent show audition. There was a pause, then her calm voice. Sing from your heart, not your fear. The judges will hear the difference. Those words steadied him more than any practice ever had. He grabbed his keyboard and hurried out, heart pounding with anticipation. The audition hall in Suralire was chaos. Hundreds of hopefuls filled the space, some clutching guitars, others dressed in flamboyant costumes. The air buzzed with nervous energy, and the faint smell of sweat and fried plantain from the street vendors outside. When Cola's number was called, he stepped onto the stage, lights glaring in his eyes. 3 judges sat at a long table, their expressions unreadable. What will you be performing? One asked, without looking up from his notes. A song I wrote myself, Cola replied, his voice shaking. He placed his keyboard down, fingers trembling as he played the opening chords. Then he began to sing. The hall quieted. His voice was raw and perfect, but filled with longing, the story of a boy chasing dreams while the world doubted him. For a moment, Cola forgot the judges, forgot the crowd. He was singing to himself, and maybe to the neighbor behind the wall who believed in him. But halfway through, Nurse caught up. His fingers slipped, hitting the wrong chord. He faltered, stammering as whispers rose from the audience. He tried to recover, but his voice cracked, betraying his fear. The judges exchanged glances. When he finished, silence filled the room. One judge finally spoke. You have passion, but passion is not enough. Your performance was unpolished, your control weak. I'm sorry, you're not moving forward. The words hit Cola like a hammer. He bowed stiffly, thanked them, and walked off the stage with shoulders heavy. Outside, he sank onto the curb, burying his face in his hands. For a long while, he didn't move. That night, back in his room, Cola didn't touch his keyboard. He lay on his mattress, staring at the ceiling, feeling like a failure. From the other side, Doyen spoke softly through the wall. Cola! He didn't answer. I heard the news. But remember, falling doesn't mean you failed. It means you tried. That's more than most people ever do. Her words slipped into the cracks of his despair. Slowly, he closed his eyes. For the first time that day, a small flame of hope flickered again. 2 days after Cola's failed audition, the sound of hammering stopped completely. The silence on the other side of the wall was unusual. Normally, Doyen's sculpting echoed like a heartbeat through the plaster. Concerned, Kola pressed his ear against the wall. "Neighbor, you okay?" There was no answer. Hours later, he heard the faint scrape of a chair and the tired sigh of a woman carrying the weight of the world. Finally, her voice came, low and strained. "Kola, I don't feel like sculpting today." He frowned. Doyen never admitted weakness. Something was wrong. "Talk to me. What happened?" She hesitated before replying. "Do you remember the company I told you about? The one I used to work for before I left Enugu?" "Yes. The one that didn't value you." Her voice shook. "They stole one of my designs. A piece I created years ago. Today I saw it on a flyer for their new collection, plastered across magazines. They've claimed it as theirs, and there's nothing I can do. No one will believe me." Kola's fists clenched. "What nonsense! That's your work. You should fight them." "I can't," Doyen whispered. "They have lawyers, money, connections. I have nothing. Just my tools and a small rented studio." Kola pressed his palm against the wall as if he could reach her through it. "Doyen, listen to me. That clay you mold, that's your voice. Nobody can steal the fire in your hands. They may copy your work, but they can never copy you." Her silence lingered. Then she let out a soft, bitter laugh. "You sound so sure. But I'm tired, Kola. Tired of fighting to prove I'm not a fool for choosing this life." For the first time since his failed audition, Kola found himself rising with conviction. "Then let me fight with you. We're both stubborn dreamers, remember? You're not alone." That evening, Doyen sat at her work table, staring at the block of clay. Her mind replayed the betrayal, how her former boss had smiled as she shared her design, promising recognition, only to claim it as company property. She clenched her jaw, anger and despair warring inside her. And then, softly at first, she heard music. Kola was playing again. Not loudly, not boastfully, but gently. The melody carried through the wall like a hand reaching out. It wasn't perfect, but it was steady, patient, and anchor. Without realizing, her own hands began to move. She picked up her chisel, pressed it to the clay, and worked. Each strike matched his notes, the rhythm pulling her back from hopelessness. Hours passed. By midnight, both neighbors were still awake, creating in silence, their crafts intertwined through the wall. When she finally set down her tools, breathless and exhausted, she whispered, "Thank you, Kola." On the other side, he smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Always, neighbor." And for the first time that week, Doyen slept with peace in her heart. By the following weekend, the bond between Kola and Doyen had grown undeniable. Their conversations had shifted from sharp banter to gentle confessions. They spoke about everything: childhood memories, favorite foods, secret fears. The wall had become their witness. That Saturday evening, as the sun bled orange over Lagos, Kola pressed his forehead against the wall. "Neighbor," he said softly, "don't you ever get tired of talking to me without seeing me?" There was a long pause before Doyen replied, "Maybe. Sometimes I wonder if you saw me, would you still talk to me the same way?" Kola laughed lightly. "What kind of question is that? I don't need to see you to know you're special. I can hear it in your voice, in your courage. But still," he hesitated, "I would like to meet you. Just once. Properly." Silence. Doyen's heart raced. Part of her longed to say yes, to step out from behind the safety of the wall. But fear clutched her chest. She thought of her family's disapproval, of the art world's betrayals, of all the people who had looked at her and seen only failure. "Not yet," she whispered. "Please, let's keep this just us for now." Kola closed his eyes, disappointment settling in his chest. But he forced a smile into his words. "All right. When you're ready, I'll be here." The next day, fate tested them. Doyen's younger sister, Ifeanyi, came visiting, bringing food and chatter. As they talked in Doyen's small studio, Kola's laughter carried through the wall. Ifeanyi's eyes lit up. "Who's that? You didn't tell me you had a neighbor this lively." Doyen waved her off. "He's just someone noisy." But Ifeanyi was curious. On her way out, she deliberately knocked on Kola's door. He opened it, surprised, finding a cheerful young woman smiling at him. "You must be the musician," she said. "I'm Doyen's sister." Kola blinked. His heart leapt. Doyen's sister. That meant she was right there, just steps away. For a split second, he almost craned his neck to peek inside her room. But Ifeanyi was already chatting away, asking about his music. From inside, Doyen froze. She could hear their voices clearly. The thought of Kola seeing her unprepared made her stomach twist. She quickly called out, "Ife, let's go. We're late." Ifeanyi laughed. Okay. Nice meeting you, Mr. Musician." And with that, she hurried off. That night, he pressed his hand to the wall. "One day, neighbor. One day, you'll let me be with you." On the other side, Doyen rested her head against the same wall, whispering into the silence, "I'm afraid of that day, but I want it too." Neither of them slept much, their thoughts tangled between longing and fear. Monday morning was heavy with rain, the kind that turned Ikoyi's streets into silver rivers. Doyen sat at her sculpting table, the steady tap of water on the roof matching the beat of her restless heart. She had barely slept. Kola's words, "One day you'll let me see you," still lingered in her ears. She was about to reach for her tools when a sharp knock rattled her door. Frowning, she wiped her hands on a rag and opened it. Standing there, umbrella in hand and a smirk on his lips, was a man she thought she'd left behind in Enugu, Chijioke Nwosu. "Hello, Doyen," he said smoothly, his eyes sweeping the small studio with practiced disdain. "Still playing with mud, I see." Doyen's stomach tightened. "What are you doing here?" Chijioke stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, shaking raindrops from his expensive jacket. "I'm in Lagos now, expanding my company. And imagine my surprise when I found out my former employee is here too. I thought I'd check on you." "Former partner," Doyen corrected sharply. "Not employee. Don't twist it." He chuckled. "Partner? You always had an inflated sense of your worth. That design you claim was stolen." "Was stolen," she snapped. "Was company property," he finished, ignoring her anger. "But let's not argue. I have a proposal. You're talented, Doyen. Raw, but talented. Come back. Work with me. I'll make sure your name shines. Alone, you'll fade into nothing. With me, you'll be unstoppable." Before she could respond, a loud thud came from the other side of the wall. "Who's that?" Chijioke asked, narrowing his eyes. "No one," Doyen said quickly. But her pulse raced. She knew Kola had heard everything. Indeed, Kola had pressed his ear against the wall the moment the man's voice entered the room. Each word felt like an intrusion, a threat. His chest burned as he listened to Chijioke belittle Doyen, reduce her to nothing. Kola clenched his fists. When Chijioke finally left, his cologne lingering unpleasantly in the air, Doyen sat heavily on her stool. The silence weighed on her until Kola's voice came softly through the wall. "Doyen, who was that man?" She closed her eyes. "Someone I wish I could erase. His name is Chijioke. He was once my business partner. He took advantage of me, stole my work, and now pretends he made me. And the worst part, he's powerful enough to convince people he's right." Kola's voice hardened. "He's a vulture. You can't go back to him." "I don't intend to," she whispered. "But he won't stop until he gets what he wants." For a long time, neither spoke. Then Kola said quietly, "Don't worry. You're not alone anymore. As long as I'm here, he won't win." Doyen felt tears sting her eyes. For years she had fought battles in silence, carrying her burdens alone. But now, through this thin wall, came the voice of someone who believed in her. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in him too. The next afternoon, the compound bustled with the usual chaos, children chasing each other in the rain-soaked yard, hawkers shouting from the street, the caretaker arguing with a tenant about overdue rent. But Kola's mind was fixed on one thing, Chijioke. He hadn't slept properly since overhearing that arrogant voice through the wall. The thought of Doyen being harassed by a man who once stole her work gnawed at him. By evening, when he spotted Chijioke's sleek black SUV parked near the gate, anger boiled over. Without thinking, Kola marched across the compound. He found Chijioke standing near his car, phone pressed to his ear, laughing as if he owned the world. "Excuse me," Kola said sharply. Chijioke lowered his phone, eyebrows arched. "Yes, and you are. Thank you so much for staying with us till this very point of the story. If you are enjoying it, please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear the lessons you learned from this story and your thoughts on how we can continue improving to give you the very best thank you. Chijiok lowered his phone, eyebrows arched. Yes, and you are. I'm Doyen's neighbor, Kola said, chest heaving. And I heard everything you said yesterday. Leave her alone. She doesn't need you. Chijiok chuckled, amused. Ah, the musician boy. I thought I heard your terrible singing through the wall. You think you can protect her? Look at you. Second-hand clothes. No car, no name. You're nobody. Kola's fists clenched. Maybe I'm nobody, but at least I don't build my name on stealing other people's dreams. That wiped the smirk off Chijiok's face. His eyes narrowed, voice turning cold. Careful, boy. Lagos is not kind to people who bark at lions. Stay in your lane, before you ruin yourself. Kola stepped closer, defiance blazing in his eyes. I'll never stay in any lane that lets men like you trample others. Touch Doyen again, and you'll answer to me. Before the confrontation could escalate, Doyen appeared at the gate, clutching a bag of supplies. Her heart sank when she saw them squared off. Kola, what are you doing? Chijiok smirked again, slipping into his SUV. Control your neighbor, Doyen. He has more mouth than sense. Next time, I won't be so patient. With that, he drove off, tires splashing water onto the street. Doyen turned furiously to Kola. What were you thinking? Kola bristled. I was protecting you. That man is poison. He doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as you. You don't understand, she snapped, her voice shaking. Chijiok isn't some street thug you can scare away with angry words. He has power, connections. If you provoke him, he'll destroy you. And me. Kola's anger faltered, replaced with hurt. So I should just watch him bully you? Pretend I don't care? Her eyes softened, but her fear was stronger. No, Kola. I can't lose the little I've built because of reckless pride. Please, stay out of this. The words stung more than she realized. That night, Kola sat alone in his room, staring at his silent keyboard. On the other side of the wall, Doyen sat with her half-finished sculpture, her hands trembling too much to continue. They were still connected, but for the first time, the wall between them felt heavier than ever. The days after the confrontation were quieter than ever. Too quiet. Kola no longer sang in the evenings. His keyboard sat untouched, covered by an old cloth. He spent hours lying on his mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying Doyen's words. Please, stay out of this. Had he overstepped? Maybe she was right. What could he, a struggling musician with nothing, do against someone like Chijiok? Still, the memory of that smug voice made his blood boil. But more than that, the memory of Doyen's fear haunted him. On the other side of the wall, Doyen was just as restless. She had scolded Kola out of fear, not anger. Yet now, the silence between them felt like punishment. She missed his noisy laughter, his terrible off-key singing, even his ridiculous ghost jokes. The quiet pressed on her chest like a weight. One evening, unable to bear it any more, she pressed her palm against the wall. Kola, she called softly. Silence. She tried again. Musician, are you there? Still nothing. Doyen sighed, leaning her forehead against the wall. I didn't mean to push you away. I was scared. Scared of him, and scared of what could happen to you because of me. Her voice wavered. But you should know. Your words, your foolish courage, they make me feel less alone. Don't take that away from me. On the other side, Kola's eyes stung. He had been listening the whole time, frozen, unsure if he should answer. Slowly, he sat up and pressed his hand against the same spot on the wall. I thought you didn't need me, he murmured. Doyen's heart leapt. I never said that. You told me to stay out of your battles, Kola said quietly. And maybe you're right. Maybe I'm too small to fight giants. But Doyen, I can't stand by and watch you suffer. There was a pause, heavy with all the words they hadn't said. Then Doyen whispered, Do you know why I really left Enugu? It wasn't just about art. It was because of people like Chijiok, men who think they own everything, including women's dreams. I've fought so hard to build something here. If I lose it, I don't know who I'll be. Her honesty cracked something in Kola's chest. He pressed his forehead against the wall. Then let's fight differently. Not with fists, not with reckless anger, but with what we have. Your hands, my voice. They can't silence that. For the first time in days, Doyen smiled through her tears. You make it sound easy. It won't be easy, Cola admitted. But at least we won't be fighting alone. That night, the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was tender, a pause filled with unspoken promises. And though they still hadn't seen each other's faces, both knew that the wall was no longer a barrier. It was becoming a bond. The following morning, sunlight streamed into the rooftop rooms, golden and warm after days of rain. Cola sat cross-legged on his mattress, notebook open, pencil poised. But instead of writing lyrics, he was staring blankly at the page. From the other side of the wall, Doyen's tools clinked softly. Then her voice came, light and teasing. Are you sulking again, musician? Cola chuckled, shaking his head. No, just thinking, trying to find the right words. For another sad song? She asked. Not sad this time, he said firmly. I want to write something different, something hopeful. Curious, Doyen set her chisel aside and leaned close to the wall. Hopeful about what? Cola hesitated, then smiled. About us. Two stubborn dreamers in Lagos, shouting at ghosts and hammering clay, yet somehow still standing. Her chest warmed at his words. Then stop thinking so hard and just write what you feel. Encouraged, Cola began humming, scribbling lines into his notebook. His voice rose, tentative but steady. A wall may stand between us, but I can still hear you breathe. Your courage keeps me singing, even when the world won't believe. On the other side, Doyen closed her eyes, letting the words wash over her. She felt her hands itching to create. Reaching for a fresh block of clay, she began shaping it without overthinking, letting instinct guide her. As Cola's song grew, her sculpture took form. A pair of hands reaching through a crack in a wall, fingers almost touching. Hours slipped by unnoticed. By evening, Cola's room was filled with scattered lyrics, and Doyen's table held the beginnings of her most emotional piece yet. When they both finally paused, breathless and satisfied, Cola laughed. Neighbor, what are you making in there? I could hear your tools dancing to my song. Doyen smiled, brushing clay, dust from her hands. A sculpture, inspired by your stubborn voice. Do you want to know what it is? Of course. She hesitated, then whispered. Two hands, reaching for each other. Through a wall. Cola's heart pounded. For a moment, he had no words. Then he said softly, Doyen, that's exactly how I feel every time I sing to you. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty. It was thick with meaning, with something neither dared name yet. Finally, Doyen cleared her throat. If you finish your song, promise me I'll be the first to hear it. And if you finish your sculpture, Cola countered, promise me I'll be the first to see it. Neither realized it then, but promises had already begun to bind them, gentle threads of trust weaving into something stronger than friendship. That night, as Lagos glittered outside, both fell asleep with smiles, each dreaming of the same thing, a future where walls no longer stood between them. By midweek, Doyen's small studio was buzzing with unusual energy. A local art curator, impressed by one of her older pieces displayed at a boutique gallery, had paid her a surprise visit. He was tall, bespectacled, and full of enthusiasm, his voice booming as he walked around her cramped space. These are powerful, Miss Okoye, he declared, pausing before the clay sculpture of two hands reaching through a wall. This is extraordinary. I'm curating an exhibition at Terra Culture next month. I want your work there. Doyen's heart stopped. Terra Culture, the hub of Lagos creativity, where the city's elite mingled with international eyes. You mean my sculptures, in that exhibition? Yes, the curator said firmly. People need to see this. I'll be in touch about the details. With a polite nod, he was gone, leaving the scent of possibility hanging in the air. For a long time, Doyen stood frozen. Then slowly, a smile spread across her face. She had fought so long for recognition, and finally it had arrived. On the other side of the wall, Cola had heard everything. His chest tightened as the words echoed in his mind. Terra Culture, extraordinary exhibition. Pride bloomed for her, but alongside it came a sharp sting of doubt. When she finally called through the wall, her voice was bright with excitement. Cola, did you hear? They want my work in Terra Culture. Cola forced cheer into his reply. That's incredible, neighbor. You deserve it. Her laughter rang like music. For the first time, I feel like maybe I was right to leave home to fight for this. Kola, we did it. He smiled, but his own failures loomed large in his mind. Just a week ago, he had been told by judges that he wasn't good enough. He imagined her sculptures being praised by Lagos elites while he struggled to book gigs in small bars. That night, Doyen sculpted late into the evening, pouring joy into her work. Kola sat with his keyboard, staring at the keys but unable to play. Finally, he scribbled in his notebook, "What if she rises and I remain here? What if the wall between us grows too high?" The next day, Doyen's sister Ifyananya visited again, bringing food and congratulations. As they chatted, Kola overheard Ife teasing, "Soon you'll be a star, Doyen. Who knows, maybe Chijiok himself will try to crawl back just to stand beside you." The mention of that name was like salt on a wound. That evening, when Doyen knocked gently on the wall to share her progress, Kola's replies were short, distracted. She noticed the change immediately. "Kola, what's wrong?" "Nothing," he said quickly. "I'm just tired." But when she pressed her hand against the wall, she could feel the heaviness in his silence. For the first time, it wasn't the noise between them that hurt, it was the quiet. For the first time since they had struck their truce, the wall felt cold. Kola avoided his keyboard. The notebook on his floor remained blank, save for a few half-finished lines he couldn't bring himself to sing. He spent his evenings staring at the flickering bulb above him, listening as Doyen's studio came alive next door. The sound of her tools, once comforting, now filled him with unease. Each chisel strike was a reminder that she was moving forward while he was stuck in place. She was building a future, her future, while his dreams seemed to crumble. "Neighbor!" Doyen's voice broke the silence one night. Kola lay still, pretending not to hear. She tried again, softer this time. "Kola, are you there?" He sighed and finally answered, his voice dull. "Yes." "You've been so quiet lately," she said. "You don't play anymore. Did I do something wrong?" "No," he replied quickly. "It's not you. I'm just tired." But Doyen wasn't convinced. She pressed her palm against the wall. "You know you can tell me anything. That's what we do, isn't it?" Kola closed his eyes, torn between confession and pride. Finally, he whispered, "I don't want to hold you back." "What do you mean?" "You're rising, Doyen. Terra culture, exhibitions, people are finally seeing your worth. And me, I'm just a boy who failed an audition. I don't want to be the reason you dim your light." Her heart clenched. She wished she could see him, look into his eyes and make him believe. Instead, she leaned her forehead against the wall. "Kola, do you think I would have made it this far without you? The night they stole my design, I was ready to give up. Your words, your music, they kept me going. You're not holding me back. You're the reason I can move forward." But Kola only muttered, "Maybe," and the conversation ended in uneasy silence. The following days were harder. Doyen threw herself into preparing her sculptures for the exhibition. She worked tirelessly, barely stopping to eat. She wanted to prove herself, but she also hoped the success would reassure Kola, show him that his belief in her wasn't wasted. Meanwhile, Kola grew restless. He avoided his friends, avoided the caretaker's curious glances, avoided even his keyboard. Every time he thought of Doyen standing in a glittering hall, surrounded by admirers and wealthy patrons, his chest tightened with jealousy he hated himself for feeling. One evening, desperate for air, he wandered the streets of Ikoyi. Neon lights glowed from luxury restaurants, cars glided past, and laughter spilled from bars. He felt invisible among it all, a small dreamer in a city too big for him. When he returned, he stood before the thin wall, his palm hovering over it but not touching. On the other side, he could hear Doyen humming faintly as she worked. He wanted to join her, to tell her everything, to let the wall carry his fears away. Instead, he whispered to himself, "She deserves more than me." And for the first time, he didn't say goodnight. The night of the Terra Culture exhibition arrived with the kind of glamour Lagos elites adored. Luxury cars lined the entrance, women in dazzling gowns floated through the halls, and men in sleek abatas exchanged handshakes that hinted at business deals and power. The air smelled of perfume, champagne, and ambition. Doyen stood near her corner of the gallery, palms damp as she watched guests circle her sculptures. Her heart thudded with every passing glance, every whispered comment. But when people stopped, when they leaned closer to admire the intricate details, her chest filled with cautious pride. The centerpiece, the sculpture of two hands reaching through a wall, drew the most attention. Patrons lingered before it, murmuring about its depth and symbolism. One woman even called over the curator, saying, "This piece speaks louder than words. It feels alive." For the first time in years, Doyen's work was being celebrated not as an afterthought, but as art worthy of attention. Yet, even in her triumph, something was missing. She found herself glancing toward the door, hoping to see a familiar figure in second-hand clothes and an earnest smile. But Kola wasn't there. Back in his rooftop room, Kola sat on his mattress, staring at his keyboard. He had told himself he wouldn't go. He didn't belong in a hall filled with glittering elites. What would he wear? What would he say? He had convinced himself Doyen wouldn't notice his absence. But as the night wore on, guilt gnawed at him. He imagined her standing alone in that grand hall, her work on display, her heart racing. She had asked him once, "Promise me you'll be the first to see it." And here he was, hiding in the shadows of his insecurity. Finally, with a deep breath, he stood, brushed the dust off his shirt, and left. At the gallery, Doyen's triumph was briefly interrupted by a familiar, unwelcome voice. Chijioke strolled in, flanked by two associates. His eyes landed on her sculpture, and a smug smile spread across his face. "Well, well," he drawled, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I see my former employee has been busy. Interesting how she's finally learning from my style." Anger flared in Doyen's chest, but before she could respond, a voice cut through the crowd. "She didn't learn from you. She taught herself." Heads turned. Kola stood at the edge of the gathering, his eyes fixed firmly on Chijioke. His clothes were plain compared to the glittering crowd, but his presence carried a weight of honesty that silenced the room. He walked forward, voice steady. "Doyen's art is hers. Every line, every curve, every breath of it. It comes from her courage, not from thieves who feed on others' dreams." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Doyen's throat tightened. She hadn't expected him to come, but he was here, standing with her, even when he felt he had nothing to give. For the first time that night, she felt complete. The exhibition ended in thunderous applause. Guests crowded around Doyen's corner, eager to shake her hand, take pictures beside her sculpture, and congratulate her on her work. For once, the spotlight she had feared and longed for rested fully on her. But much of the chatter was not about her art alone. It was about Kola's outburst. "Did you hear that boy speak?" a man in a wine-colored bodice said to his wife. "He was fearless. Called out Chijioke right in front of everyone," she whispered back. "And his words," another added, "they sounded like lyrics." "Who is he?" Within minutes, phones had come out. Guests tweeted, posted, recorded clips of the confrontation. By the next morning, Lagos gossip blogs were buzzing with headlines. "Unknown musician defends sculptor against elite bully at Terraculture." Back in her rooftop studio, Doyen sat by her clay table, exhausted but glowing. She pressed her palm against the thin wall and called, "Kola!" On the other side, silence. Then slowly his voice. "I didn't mean to steal your spotlight." She smiled softly. "You didn't steal anything. You gave me strength. When Chijioke tried to humiliate me, it was your voice that silenced him." "But now everyone is talking about me," Kola muttered. "Not for my music, just for shouting in a hall where I didn't belong." Doyen shook her head. "Don't you see? That wasn't just shouting. That was your gift. You spoke like a song, Kola. Raw and true. People felt it. That's what music is meant to do." His chest tightened. He wanted to believe her, but doubt lingered. 2 days later, a local journalist came knocking on the compound gate, asking for the young musician who stood up to Chijioke. Kola almost refused, embarrassed, but Doyen insisted. "This is your chance. Don't hide." Reluctantly, he gave a short interview, speaking about dreams, about fighting for truth. His humility charmed the reporter. By the end of the week, his name was appearing in places he'd only dreamed of, small mentions in blogs, whispers in entertainment circles. But attention brought pressure. Invitations came for him to perform at small events. Yet each time he sat at his keyboard, Nerves strangled his voice. What if I fail again? He thought. Doyen noticed his hesitation. One evening, she tapped the wall gently. Kola! Yes! Play for me, she said simply. Not for the world. Just me. For a long time, he didn't move. Then slowly, he uncovered his keyboard. Fingers trembling, he began to play the song he had written about them, about two dreamers divided by a wall but reaching anyway. His voice cracked at first, but then grew steady, filled with truth. On the other side, Doyen closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. His music filled her like sunlight. See, she whispered when he finished. That's the Kola the world needs to hear. For the first time in weeks, hope stirred inside him, not for fame, but for the courage to keep singing. Chijiok was not a man who forgot humiliation. The night at Terra Culture, when Kola's words had stolen the crowd's favor and reduced him to silence, burned like fire in his chest. 4 days, whispers followed him in elite circles. The sculptor's neighbor exposed him, the boy from nowhere who spoke truth. By the following week, he struck back. A rumor began spreading through art blogs that Doyen's sculpture wasn't hers at all, but inspired heavily by designs she had stolen during her time at Chijiok's firm. He painted her as a bitter ex-employee trying to drag his name down. When Doyen saw the headlines, her stomach dropped. All the pride she had felt after Terra Culture evaporated. Her phone buzzed with calls she didn't want to answer. That night, her voice trembled through the wall. Kola, he's trying to ruin me again. What if they believe him this time? What if it all ends here? Kola pressed his palm firmly against the wall. His voice was steady, even as his chest burned. Then we fight. Not with anger this time, but with truth. The next morning, Kola contacted the journalist who had interviewed him after the exhibition. Together, they arranged for a feature on Doyen's story, not about Chijiok, but about her journey. Photos of her sculpting process were taken. Testimonies from neighbors who had seen her work late into the night were recorded. When the article went live, it painted a different picture. The woman who sculpted through walls, Doyen Okoye's fight for art and identity. It highlighted her courage, her originality, and most importantly, the authenticity of her work. The article went viral, not just because of her art, but because of the human story behind it. A woman who defied family expectations, a neighbor who found hope in unlikely places, an artist who refused to be erased. Chijiok, furious, tried to fight back. He hosted a press briefing, declaring, "She owes everything to me." But the more he spoke, the more bitter he sounded. Public sympathy was no longer with him. Sponsors began pulling back, wary of his arrogance. Meanwhile, Kola's role in the story could not be ignored. Clips of his passionate defense at Terra Culture resurfaced, paired with snippets of his song recorded secretly by a guest that night. Suddenly, event organizers wanted him to perform. Not because he was perfect, but because he was real. At first, fear clawed at him, but when Doyen pressed her hand against the wall and said, "Sing, Kola. Let them hear what I hear," his courage returned. The climax came at a small but packed performance in Suralire. Kola stood on stage, knees shaking, staring at the crowd. Then he saw her, Doyen, at the back, smiling softly. He began to sing the song he wrote for her, the one about two hands reaching through a wall. The room fell silent, and by the final note, the crowd erupted in applause. For the first time, Kola believed he belonged. And for the first time, Doyen knew the chains of Chijiok's shadow were finally broken. The rooftop compound was quiet that Sunday evening, the kind of quiet that carried expectation. The sun was dipping low, painting Okoye in gold. For weeks, Kola and Doyen had spoken through the wall, shared secrets, fought battles, healed wounds. But now, something unspoken lingered between them, the need to finally see each other. Kola paced his room nervously, running his hands through his hair. His performance in Suralire had lit a spark of confidence he'd never felt before. But tonight, it wasn't about music or applause. Tonight, it was about her. On the other side, Doyen cleaned the clay dust from her hands and stared at her finished sculpture, the two hands reaching through a cracked wall. She traced the figures with trembling fingers. How poetic, she thought, that their own lives mirrored her art. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady but soft. "Kola!" "Yes, neighbor." A pause then, Maybe it's time. Maybe the wall has done its job. What do you think? His heart skipped. For a moment he couldn't breathe. Then, with a shaky laugh, he replied, I've been waiting to hear you say that. They both decided to meet outside on the rooftop. He came out first, and there she was, Doyen. Not just a voice, not just laughter through a wall, but flesh and blood. She was taller than he had imagined, her posture graceful, her hands strong yet delicate from sculpting. And her eyes carried every late-night conversation, every secret shared. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kola whispered, This is even more real than I dreamed. Doyen's lips curved into a trembling smile. And you look exactly like your voice. Kola reached for her hand, and when their fingers touched, it felt like the sculpture she had made had come alive. No more wall. That night, as Lagos glittered under the moonlight, Kola and Doyen stood together in the space that had once divided them. Two stubborn dreamers, no longer separated by plaster and fear, but bound by the courage to reach across. And so, their love story began, not behind walls, but in the open, where it was always meant to be. Thank you so much for staying with us till the very end of the story. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear the lessons you learned from this story and your thoughts on how we can continue improving to give you the very best. Every story we bring to you is crafted with passion, care, and dedication, because here at Munlyt Stories, our mission is simple: to create stories that entertain, inspire, and connect us all. So, keep the conversation going in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Till next time, we are Munlyt Stories, bringing you amazing tales that touch hearts and spark imaginations. Stay blessed, stay inspired, and see you in the next story.